All right, we will continue with Aric Almirola, driver of the number 10 Shazam Smithfield Ford. Shazam. Aric comes in here 6th in points. You have 4 top 10s to start the season. Talk about that strong start to the season for your team.
Yeah, it's been a great start to 2019. I really feel like as a team we've picked right up where we left off at the end of 2018. Obviously, the end of 2018 was really good for us, and we ran really strong, found ourselves in contention to win a lot of races, won at Talladega, and closed out the year really strong, finishing 5th in the points. So if you're not going to make it to the Final Four, you might as well be the best of the rest, and we were able to accomplish that. So that was really nice, and I felt like that last 4 to 5 months of last season, our team just really got on a roll, and we were really in tune with each other and just maximizing each and every single weekend. And I feel like we've rolled out of 2019 the exact same way. Daytona, it is what it is. We got caught up in a wreck. But then since then, we've really maximized each and every weekend and done a really good job.
Awesome. Thank you very much. We'll open up for media questions. Please raise your hand. We'll start with Mark Garrow here and come up to Matt.
Thank you. Mark Garrow, PRN. 2 questions, one Martinsville, one Texas. Last fall, we had the bump and run, and if you were in Martin Truex Jr.'s shoes, do you think that's out of bounds? And I guess if you're in Joey Logano's shoes, do you feel like, hey, that's okay?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's very situational. Joey felt like with the position that they were in and where they were at with their race cars at the time, he didn't feel like they had a car capable of going, to Texas and winning, or to Phoenix. He felt like, in the closing laps here at Martinsville, that if he had that shot to win, he needed to take it, or else they were in a vulnerable spot to not make it to the championship 4. Where when you look at Martin's situation, he had like 60 or 70 bonus points going into that round of the playoffs. Felt very comfortable on points. Obviously wanted to get the win, but not really do or die. Where Joey felt like he was in a do or die position. So I think when you look at that, it's 2 very different dynamics. And to be quite honest, Martin has always raced, like that. Martin is probably one of the cleanest racers out on the circuit, and Joey has typically always raced like that. Joey has always been very aggressive, and not been afraid to lay the bumper to somebody, and not really been afraid of the consequences if they come back to him. So I think that that's really just personality and situational more so than it is anything else.
Would you do the same thing that Joey did under the circumstances?
Sitting here in the media center, it's hard to give you an answer. When you're in the heat of the moment, and the closing laps of the race, and everything is so much different. You've been in a hot race car for 3 hours. It's hard. It's hard to sit here in the media center and give you that answer, but probably.
As far as Texas and this new low downforce, low horsepower, high downforce package, do you feel like
I was wondering if NASCAR changed the rules when you said that. It's like, oh man, maybe I need to update.
Yeah, a new set of regulations. Do you think that you guys are getting more and more tuned into it? The races will continue to get better, and Texas will be better than, say Atlanta or Fontana or Vegas, that kind of thing.
I think what we've seen so far is very typical of what happens in our sport. There's rule changes, and when we have those rule changes, there's a couple of teams that figure it out faster than anybody else, and they clearly separate themselves. And I think with what you've seen at the beginning of the year, Penske and Gibbs have done that. They figured it out, and they've separated themselves. They're the same cars contending to win the races week in and week out. And at every track, really. I mean, it doesn't matter when you look back to, Atlanta, Vegas, Phoenix, and then California. Those cars were the most dominant cars. There was some other cars that showed some slight moments of speed and competitiveness, but for the vast majority of the race and those weekends, those cars are the ones to beat. But then all the other teams go to work. They start looking at where their deficiencies are and start figuring it out. And the really good teams catch up. And then we start to get more parity. And you even saw that last year. Look back at last year and look at the beginning of the year. Through the first 6 months of the year, nobody would have picked a Penske car to win the championship. You know, all the talk was about Gibbs and the 18 and the 78 and about, you know, Stewart Haas Racing and the 4 car, you know, predominantly. But then you look at the latter half of the year, and Brad goes on to win, you know, three races, I think, in a row. You know, historic big races, Darlington, Indy, the first race of the playoffs. And then Joey wins here at Martinsville and wins the championship. So tides turn. Things change. Really good race teams go to work and develop and figure out what they need to go fast. And so, you know, I feel like for us at Stewart Haas Racing, we're in that stage right now.
Matt Weaver, Auto Week. Similar to Mark's second question. Excuse me. Are you surprised, or did you anticipate having more grip? Not necessarily your team, but when you look at Vegas and you look at California, Atlanta's different. But did you think that the series across the whole would have a little bit more grip than what we've had?
No. I mean, and I think one of the things is we've only got a small sample size of this before we implemented these rules, right? We saw it at the All-Star race, and then we saw it at some tests, and all of the tests and the All-Star race, for that matter, were 20 to 25 lap runs. Nobody ever made a full fuel run with this package, and I think when you look at the All-Star race, I believe the first stage was the longest of all the stages, and towards the end of that stage, it started to get strung out, and people were lifting, and it got more single file. But then caution comes out, you know, all the cars get bunched back up, and everybody takes back off, and then those last few stages were way shorter. And so, and you see that with the racing we're seeing today. 10 laps, you know, it's a hornet's nest. We're all you know, 3, 4, 5 wide, you know, and it's very racy. But then as the grip starts to go away and we all have to start lifting off the throttle, there becomes separation in field. And I think I personally expected that. I don't know that NASCAR expected that. I'm not sure what their engineers and all of, you know, the smart people that figured out, you know, how to implement this package. I'm not sure what they saw in computer modeling and all of that stuff, but from the little bit of testing that I did at Charlotte in October and kind of what we saw, a small glimpse at the All-Star race, I kind of expected that the racing would be really kind of crazy and exciting when we had new tires and a lot of grip in the cars, and then once the grip starts to go away and the tire falls off, the field would just separate.
And a follow-up, the extra 50 horsepower that you guys kind of collectively bargained for you to get back from the All-Star race to this year, what has been the biggest difference that you can feel 3 races in because of the extra 50?
I don't know. I don't really feel, I don't know. It's hard to say. It's hard to answer that question, and quite honestly, just because we haven't done it at Charlotte, you know? It's hard to say. When you ask a race car driver, well, not all race car drivers, but when you ask most race car drivers about horsepower, I'm always going to tell you just more, right? Like if you give me the option of having, you know, 300 horsepower or 310, I want 310. If you give me the option between 400 horsepower and 1,000 horsepower, I want 1,000. Like that's what's cool. Like that's what we grow up. You know, you grow up racing go-karts that make 10 horsepower, and then you transition into, you know, a stock car that makes 400 horsepower, and then then I started driving super late models that make 600 horsepower, and you just kind of go through the ranks, and you get more power and faster cars, and it becomes challenging the more the cars have more horsepower, and you have to really hone your driving skill to keep the power, you know, connected to the ground. And so I think every race car driver you ask will always ask for more horsepower. And NASCAR, you know, obviously asked our opinion, and we all begged for more horsepower because we want to feel that acceleration, and we want to go fast.
I want to go Kelly, Nate, and then Chris.
Kelly Crandall, Racer.com. 2 things, Aric. First, changes could be coming to qualifying for Texas after what happened in Fontana. Any idea what that could be, or how would you like to see qualifying play out?
I'm not sure what that's going to be. You know, I look forward to there being some modifications. We've got to have, you know, we've got to have obviously cars on the racetrack during qualifying. I mean, that's not good for anybody. It's not good for us. It's not good for the fans. It's not good for the sport for cars to not be on the racetrack during a qualifying session. That being said, I've always been in favor of qualifying and the fastest car getting the pole. I mean, that's the way it's been since I was a little kid. I was 8 years old and started racing go-karts, and you know, locally we would run heat races, but when I went to state races and national races, we qualified, and the fastest kids with the fastest go-karts qualified up front, and that's all I've ever known. And so this year, with the qualifying rules the way they are, the fastest car doesn't necessarily always get the pole. It's the guy that, you know, times it right at the line, gets the best draft, and it really has less to do about the fastest race car and more about situational. And so from that aspect, I would hope that whatever rules come down the pipe incentivize, again, you know, kind of what our roots are and where having the fastest race car means something in qualifying.
Secondly, after the near misses last year with a few races you could have won, how important or how much effort or how vital is it or would it be to win multiple races this year?
You know, I think that's something that Johnny, my crew chief, and I have looked at and talked about, and even the guys on our team, is that when we look back at 2018, we won Talladega, which was great and fantastic, and we did it in clutch, you know, situation to be able to advance into the next round of the playoffs. But when we look back at 2018, we can easily sit back and look at about 5 or 6 races that we shoulda, woulda, coulda won but didn't. And we need to do a better job, you know, now with more experience and working together. We need to do a better job at capitalizing on those opportunities. When you look at the best teams in the garage, the 18, the 78, the 4, the Penske cars, the 2, the 22, those guys, when they have cars capable of winning, they win with them. And even sometimes when they don't have cars capable of winning, when they're a 3rd, 4th, 5th place car, sometimes they find ways to win. And so that's one of the things that we look at when we look back at last year, and that we want to improve going into 2019, is that if we're dealt, you know, 5 or 6 opportunities to win races this year, we want to capitalize on more than just one, you know, when we look into this season.
Aric, Nate Ryan, NBC Sports. Your teammate Harvick said at Fontana that he felt like you guys have top 5, top 10 good cars, but not winning cars. Would you agree with that assessment? And you said that Gibson Penske are above everybody else. Do you feel like you guys can turn it around in time for Texas?
Yeah, I do. I think, you know, Texas is finally the first opportunity that we'll have to actually implement change into our cars. You know, our West Coast cars were essentially built as we were getting ready for Atlanta. You know, all of our cars, you know, getting ready for Atlanta, Vegas, Phoenix, California, we're all with, you know, really one mindset and looking at certain things from the engineering department and the aero department. And now we've had an opportunity to run those handful of races and go back and digest all the information and look at everything and have this week gap here while we're at Martinsville to go through and implement, like, okay, we're getting beat, why? And okay, here's why we think we're getting beat. Let's go to work in this area and let's implement that into our Texas cars. So yeah, the West Coast was really challenging for us. I was glad that we came out of the gate as strong as we did, that we weren't off further, but I think it's very evident to all of us at SHR that we're not where we want to be. And when you hear our leader, you know, Kevin Harvick and Rodney and those guys talking about being off and not having what they need to win, we're still leading laps. You know, I've led more laps in the beginning of this year than I've led in any other year in my career. I've got 4 top 10s in a row. I'm off to probably the best start of my career, and yet we feel like our cars are not where they were last year. And that's one of the things that has me the most pumped up about this season, is that I feel like this year, coming out of the gate, we're getting the absolute most out of our cars. We have top 10, top 5 cars, and we're finishing top 10 and top 5. So when we get our cars where we need to win, I feel like we'll find ourselves in position to win some races. But right now, we have been off through these first few races, and everybody knows that. The aero department, the engineering department, the people down on the shop floor, like, they've already been turning some long hours to correct some things that we feel like we've been missing, and I think that some of that will already be implemented into our Texas cars, and then it will just continue to develop, and we're going to be playing catch up until we are, you know, routinely challenging to win races.
And how does high downforce change a short track race? And do you guys like having it? It seems like when they've had high downforce packages during a short track season, it produces better racing. Is there any reason for that? Or?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I thought last year we had a lot of great short track races, to be honest. Phoenix, and a lot of people get hung up on Phoenix being a short track. It's a mile, and so technically it's a short track, but it doesn't race anything like a short track. It is so fast that it's a mutt. it's a hybrid of a downforce track that's short track in length. Where when you look at the races last year from like Richmond and Bristol and Martinsville, we've had some great races at those, you know, nostalgic short tracks. So yeah, I think our crop of drivers and the teams and everybody, they just do such a great job at bringing really competitive race cars to these short tracks, and the drivers get all they can get, and we end up usually making it pretty exciting.
We're going to close with Chris.
Right over here. Chris Doherty with Martinsville Bulletin. Obviously, Martinsville produces a lot of crazy endings and great moments. Is there a moment, whether it's be watching at home on TV when you were growing up, being here as a fan, driving, that stands out as the most memorable moment to you?
No, not really. You know, growing up, I certainly watch NASCAR every weekend. We would be at whatever local track we were racing on Saturday night, and then, you know, Sunday morning, get up, go to church, come home from church, and turn on the TV and watch the NASCAR race. That was a very atypical weekend for us. So, but there's not a Martinsville specific race that stands out for me when I was a kid growing up. My first, you know, real memory of Martinsville was when I came here to race a late model. I thought it was so cool. This was the first time that I had ever raced at a NASCAR track where the Cup cars raced, and I just remember, you know, driving in with the truck and trailer and crossing the track and thinking like, oh man, this is awesome. Like we're here, we're where the big boys race, you know, and just feeling so amped up and excited when we came for the late model race that they run here. And it's an amazing event. At the time they were getting 250, 300 late models to make a 40 car field. And so, yeah, it was really, really cool and really exciting to come for those events.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Good luck this week.
All right. Thanks, guys. Oh, yeah, and I forgot to tell y'all, April 5th, Shazam.